Welcome to Just Liberty, where justice and liberty meet. I'm Alan Reinach, Executive Director of the Church State Council, and I'm here with my co-host, Bettina Krause, editor of Liberty Magazine. And together we're trying to recover religious liberty from the political extremes. We have a very special guest with us today, so we're going to go right into the interview.
Kola, we are absolutely delighted to welcome you to the podcast today. Kola Alapinni is an international human rights lawyer based in Nigeria. He is a graduate of law from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, and he holds a Master of Laws degree in international human rights law from the University of Essex in the UK. And this year, he was honored by the US State Department for his religious freedom advocacy. So welcome, Kola.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm back home. As I told you earlier, the Adventists were one of the earliest families I met in Ibadan, and they were very kind to me.
That's good to hear.
The Ola family in Ibadan, they introduced me to what it meant to be close to Adventists. As I told you earlier, there were people of deep conviction. If they believed in you, and they stuck by you, you can always count on their friendship. So it's nice to be home.
Well, welcome home. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
We're talking today about blasphemy laws, and to, the ear of someone who was born and raised in the US, blasphemy laws sounds just plain strange. I mean, what are blasphemy laws? How do they work within the legal system of Nigeria?
Okay, blasphemy laws they're a relic of religious laws from the Middle Ages, the days where you had the Christian crusaders and Islam, and you could not say anything against the Pope or say anything against the church or say against the Prophet Muhammad. If you do this, you'll be burnt at the stake and everything. So gradually, as you know, in the Western world, civilization made them get rid of these religious laws, heresy and everything. Before you weren't even allowed to read the Bible. With the history of the church, Martin Luther King, and who nailed the manuscripts on the doors of the church. So what we have now in Nigeria is a relic of these religious laws. When the British, who were colonial masters, came to Nigeria, they kind of got rid of the parts that offended good conscience, equity, and natural justice. So what we have, basically, say for instance, the Sharia law, which talks about if you offend or steal, your hands will be chopped off. Then if you steal again, it will be one of your limbs. Or if a woman commits adultery, she'll be stoned to death. Or if you do something which has been, which is deemed as an offense in Islamic law, the punishment could be 20 lashes, 40 lashes. So when the British, fused Nigeria together, northern and southern Nigeria, and realized that this was a huge country. For context, Nigeria has the largest gene pool of Black people in the world, where we speak over 400 languages, over 250 ethnic tribes, where 218 million people. So they realized that this were so many nations that were fusing together, and people of different beliefs, believers, non-believers, Christians, animists, etc. So they got rid of these religious laws and said, you cannot cut off people's limbs and this and that, and removed them from the Sharia law. But when we went back to civilian rule in the last 20 years, the governors of the northern states smuggled in these laws which are a violation of Nigeria's obligations. Before, when I said the British got rid of these laws, they limited Islam, for instance, to Islamic personal law, which would talk about how you got married, how you want to, share your inheritance, etc. there were no criminal provisions there. So the return of this civilian rule by the northern governors, they smuggled in through the back door because the North was not in power at that point in time. The only concession the British made when they were leaving was to give us Section 204 in the Criminal Code, which says you cannot insult any religion, and they had to put it there to appease the Northerners. Southern Nigeria is very, very different from Northern Nigeria. It's more educated, it's more exposure to Western life, etc. So I guess to appease Northern Nigeria to stay in the Union, they had to put that in the statute book. So in a nutshell, that gives us an illustration of what all these blasphemy laws are about. So blasphemy itself is if you abuse the prophet or say something against the holy book, especially in the Islamic world, you would be assumed to have committed blasphemy.
Well, from the standpoint of American law and looking at how our courts look at things, it is so vague as to lend itself to broad interpretation. What is blasphemy? If a Christian preacher gets up and says that Jesus died for your sins, and someone could say, well, that's blasphemy against the prophet, I suppose, right? And in the context of Pakistan, we've heard reports of blasphemy laws being abused simply to be able to take people's property away and, take possession of their property. They're accused of blasphemy to get them out of the way. But you've been involved in defending folks accused of blasphemy in Nigeria. Is that right? And how did you come to get interested in doing that?
I guess my dad, if he gets to listen or watch this podcast, is going to be very happy. I don't often say it. I guess my dad, he was a great human rights champion in his own little way. He didn't study law, but he had a very strong sense of what was right and what was wrong, and it was very easy to emulate his stance on some of these things, And we used to debate a lot in the living room when we have a program at 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. in Nigeria when we were growing up. It was called the Network News. We didn't have too many radio stations and TV stations like we have now. We probably have about 100 in Nigeria now. But then it was just one network service, national service. It comes on at 4 p.m. and finishes broadcasting at 11:45 or 12 midnight. But at 9 p.m., that was when they did the federal news all over Nigeria. About 30 million people used to watch it. And we would be analyzing the news, and when some of these things come up on TV, the debate in the living room and all of that. So I guess he unknowingly, sowed the seeds in me. And when I grew up studying law, I've always wanted to study law. I've always championed the rights of the less privileged right from secondary school. It was just a continuum of that. So when this issue started coming up in northern Nigeria, it was inevitable. I tell you what was ironic. When this Sharia law was being passed, we were in law school preparing for the bar finals. We had finished university. You had to do 1 year of vocational, of the bar vocational course. And we were outraged in school. How can this be happening to us? We thought we had left this behind. So it's very ironic that we used to be debating in the common law, in the common room of the law school in Abuja, about how we could allow this thing to be passed and nobody's doing anything about it. Ordinarily, that should be the job of the Federal Attorney General. He should have sued those states right to the Supreme Court, where, it has the original jurisdiction to settle it once and for all. But for politics' sake, it wasn't done. So it's ironic that over 2 decades after leaving law school, this topic which we had debated in the living room of the law school, we are now the ones trying to bring it down, so to speak, and remind Nigeria of its obligations on the international law.
The case that you're currently involved with, the young musician who's been accused of blasphemy, it's a very sensitive case and a very potentially very, very significant case for Nigeria. Can you help us understand what this case is about and how you have moved this case toward where it is now?
Okay. I'm going to try to be very brief. If I start talking about it, I get so engrossed that I can go on speaking about it for like 2 hours. So what basically happened was during the COVID-19 era, that was 2020, we heard that this young man, Sharif-Aminu Sharif, was arrested for blasphemy in northern Nigeria. He had said some things in the private WhatsApp group, and he sang some lyrics. That was what we heard then. And he had been arrested. But sometimes news takes a while from coming down from northern Nigeria to southern Nigeria, especially when there was a lockdown and all that kind of stuff. And fortunately, we had formed a group during the lockdown out of order, so we couldn't do anything. And this is very, very interesting that, so much good has now come out of the lockdown and the restrictions of COVID 2020. Take, for instance, Nigerian music. There was a boom immediately after the lockdown because all the artists were locked down in their private homes and in their recording studios. Nobody could perform shows or go on tour. So they became even more productive and there was a surge in new songs. And that's exactly what happened to us too. We, out of order, we sat down and said, okay, what can we do? We had been having this discussion before. And the lockdown allowed us to streamline and narrow down to religious freedom, religious issues. We didn't like what was going on in our country, and we had come together to form this WhatsApp group. So immediately after the lockdown, we heard that Yaya was sentenced to death, and that was shocking. And we continued debating it in the WhatsApp group. And so someone said, hey, are we just going to keep talking or actually do something? He's going to be killed. So we scrambled together. Some friends from the UK put some money together for us to dash to Kano. And fortunately, the COVID-19 restrictions were still on, addressed and blended into the culture. I wore my mask.
Sure.
And we were able to file the appeal just in the nick of time. He was sentenced to death on the 10th of August, and he had a 30-day window to appeal, which will have elapsed on the 9th of September. So we filed for him on the 3rd of September. Something interesting happened when I got to Kano, because we now found out that the judge actually sentenced 2 people. The second person was a minor. At that point in time, we thought it was a 13-year-old. That was what the court officials said, and that was what was in the international media. He had been sentenced to 10 years imprisonment as well. So when we were able to get to safety in Abuja and we had our strategy meeting once again over WhatsApp, and I had to tell the group, I said, hey, we left someone behind. There's a child. He's in prison. Hope we couldn't sleep that night. Knowing that the window for the appeal was going to lapse in a few days. So who will bail the cat? And so you have to go back. And we prepared a notice of appeal and went back to Kano. This time it was much swifter. We knew the protocol. They had known me. We have now found gatekeepers who were friendly to the cause. They're Muslims themselves, but they didn't like what was going on. And this is one of the huge lessons we learned. Never underrate anyone, even who you think it could be on the opposite side. There were some people who, opened the gates for some of the Israelites when they went into the various cities. So you have to, accommodate everyone. They didn't like what was going on, but they couldn't speak openly. So they were our gatekeepers. and they pointed us in the right direction. Even when there were other people who had been scrambling to try to save Yaya's life, but the Sharia court was preventing them. So that was a vital lesson we learned. So we filed for Umar Farouk as well, the minor, and he got off completely because it was a minor. Everybody started shouting about the case. UNICEF got involved. Everyone, they had no choice but to set him free completely. Later on, when I got him out of prison, my colleague and I went to pick him up from prison, and he told us he was 17. So, well, you're still a minor, but thank God, because what we heard was you were 13 and nobody could sleep. Leaving a 13-year-old boy to serve a 10-year sentence. And then Yaya's case, he was set free, in quote. The death sentence was quashed by the court, but he was sent back to the Sharia court. His case was remitted for a retrial, and of course we appealed it. He shouldn't even have been tried in the first place, because these Sharia criminal laws, blasphemy laws, have no place in a democracy like Nigeria. We have a constitution, and we know that this is a violation of the constitution and a violation of the international treaty which we have signed up to. The only way we can practice this Sharia law, the criminal law, as it stands now, is if we remove ourselves from the international law obligations which we have signed up to in the first place. And that's not going to happen.
I'm wondering if at any time in this process you felt that your safety was threatened, that you were at risk. We've heard all the stories, say from Pakistan, of even government officials who oppose the blasphemy laws being assassinated. Is there this kind of violence taking place in Nigeria?
Yeah, it's occupational hazard. But
you say that so sort of casually.
Yeah, it is. It's occupational hazard. If you're a surgeon, and that's what you sign up for, you could the days before we know so much about HIV and AIDS, you could prick your finger, and you could get infected. Would that stop you from saving lives or doing your job? It's occupational hazard. Every day, the policeman goes out there to protect us, strapping out his holster, trying to save us from bad people. Yesterday, somebody opened fire. On Sunday, somebody opened fire in a church in Texas. It's the world we live in now. Firemen go out and don't come back home. It's occupational hazard. It's too late to be afraid now. That's what I say. Our faces are splashed all over the internet. So you might as well. It's like Macbeth said, Shakespeare said in Macbeth, said, I've stepped in blood and I've gone so far, I might as well go forward than going backwards. The thing of Banquo. I'm forgetting my Shakespeare now, but that was in Macbeth. So he said, I've stepped so far in blood and going forward is as difficult as going backwards. It is what it is. But we take our risk assessment very seriously. We make sure we have police escorts in Kano or in any other place which we're going to. We restrict our movements. We're not obvious. The last appearance at the Court of Appeal in Kano, when we had to argue the appeal, there was a bomb blast a few weeks earlier at a school somewhere in Kano. So we had to write to the Inspector General of Police and the local Commissioner of Police, and they arranged for K9 dog sniffers and everything. So we don't take anything for granted. But I guess when your time's up, your time's up. So you're not going to allow that to stop you from doing what you're going to do. You get also threats online. We call them love letters. They say all sorts of yeah. It is what it is. But we're determined, because this is an injustice. It cannot be allowed to stand. And that's it. You're not. How long are you going to live in fear for at all times? And I am certainly not at risk compared to 150 to 200 Christians slaughtered on the plateau on Christmas Day. About 40 Christians killed in the church in our war in August 2022. I don't even, those are the people at risk. So we can't keep standing by thinking you can die in a earthquake in San Francisco or anywhere in California in the comfort of your home. About a month or two ago, we just felt the bed shaking all over the house. Then that was my first time really experiencing such vibration. If it was worse, that could have been it. So why don't you die nobly if you're going to die, and die quaking in your boots in your bedroom? It's too late to be afraid now. It's too late. So we might as well just keep marching forward.
Kola, I mean, as I'm listening to you, I mean, my mind just simply cannot take in the work that you are doing and the level of commitment it takes to do that work. And, you know, just know that your work is just appreciated so much by those of us who aren't taking those same level of risks. But on that note, is there something that people in the US can do to support your efforts? Is there any way that either the US or we as individual American citizens, can we move the needle in any way regarding what's happening in Nigeria?
Of course, there's so many ways you can help us. First is the use of social media. These cases became internationalized with the use of social media. It costs nothing, you know. I know social media has been responsible for a lot of upheavals. I mean, you had a president who tried to use up power and incite an insurrection with social media. And that tells you how powerful it is. Twitter, Facebook, you know, just say something and get it retweeted. And our cases caught the attention of the international media because we uplifted them on Twitter and tagged them. CNN found me on LinkedIn, BBC found me on Twitter, so many other people. The director of the Austrix Foundation in Austria found us on Twitter, and he wrote an open letter to the president saying he wanted to serve the jail time with his friends for Umafru. And that sure embarrassed, you know, the government. There was a nuisance value there. So these are little ways which we can, whenever we send some of these messages out, please help us retweet it, you know, amplify, you know, until it gets into the right quarters. Finance, for instance, it's not cheap to mount a legal challenge. Every visit to Kano costs about $3,000. You know, to send a legal team of 4 people. You're talking flight tickets. You're talking. We don't charge any professional fees. All these things are pro bono, but you know, evangelism is not free, so to speak. You need to buy the flight tickets. We have to get there. You have to provide for security. So many things that goes into it. You know, filing of the papers and all. It's a commitment to us. We don't take any professional fees at all, but we need to oil the machineries that we use. That's another way that you can support us. Legislation. The United States Congress has a very powerful voice, and you've been speaking for us in these cases. So also the British Parliament as well. The European Parliament passed a vote, 550 votes in support of Yahya Ahmed Sharif. 7 voted against, 3 abstained. The 550 votes have loud voice. That 28 countries in Europe. You can tell your legislators, for instance, to issue travel bans against these politicians in support of these vicious laws. Those governors from those 12 northern states, they like their wives come here for shopping. The children come to school here in the US and the UK and everything. You can inflict travel bans on them and their immediate family until they do the right thing. And all you have to say is you are in violation of international law. Your country has signed up to these things. Go and fix your stuff before you come back here. And, you know, once they have civil war at home, they would wake up rapidly. There's so many ways you can pressurize your House members and your senators. I know there's resolution HC 82, I think. Please help us let it get across. These are very important legislations that you can help us with. And so many ways too. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom has consistently asked that Nigeria be designated as a country of particular concern. We think that, and I personally think that when Nigeria was removed from that list, the killings spiked. So obviously something's wrong somewhere. This is not climate change. Climate change does not... what is the Fulani herdsman looking for in the church? Why are you opening fire on people in churches or on their lands? That's got nothing to do with climate change. Climate change didn't cause the Christmas Day killings, and it didn't cause the killing at the Catholic Church on Pentecost Day. Someone is not getting their reports right. This is not climate change. It goes beyond climate change.
We're out of time, Kola, but it strikes me that religious freedom in America for Americans is largely an intellectual game, and it's so sobering to hear you, and to realize that, just how much of a life and death issue it is in countries like yours. And we're so appreciative of your work, of your being with us today, and the time that you've taken. And I will tell you, we will pray for you and for your country and for your efforts to bring justice.
Thank you. And our legal team as well. Remember us in prayers. We're only human. We need all the help, all the prayers that you can channel our way. We appreciate it. Sometimes, prayer, not sometimes, at all times, prayers move mountains, even when we don't see them. Thank you for your support at all times.
I don't know about you, Alan, but that was, for me, a very sobering interview. I mean, it really put into perspective the work that we do, which is important work, but in most instances, it is not life and death.
That is so true. I just so often think of all of the complaints we have about religious liberty in America and how insignificant they are compared to what believers of different faiths are facing around the world.
It also reminded me of the fact that free speech, we should not take free speech for granted. We see efforts, even in this country, which has such a robust free speech regime, efforts to, get rid of viewpoints out of the public space that we're not comfortable with. But, it's really a slippery slope, because you look at countries such as Nigeria and Pakistan and other countries where there's a sort of a dominant narrative that's being protected. And you see the ultimate consequences of sort of undermining free speech.
That's the loss of freedom. Well, we're out of time. This has been Justice and Liberty. This has been Just Liberty, where liberty and justice meet. I'm Alan Reinach here with Bettina Krause. Until next time, remember, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty.